Hey, how's it going? It's Business. I want to talk to you about a farm that I've been doing during the Legacy of Phrecia bonus league, where I have made it so that syndicate farming is something that is very simple, easy to set up, and requires almost no maintenance or even interaction, while still providing you with the ability to chain farm a rank 3 syndicate member over and over and over again. I've paired it with a boss rush strategy to provide a bunch of different things. As you can see here, I've been doing boss rush for guardian maps, for idol drops off bosses who just have naturally high rarity as well as a bonus chance to drop an idol. You get full stacks of divination cards that can range from worthless to hundreds of divines depending on your luck, from Gravicius in transportation safe houses, as well as you'll drop a good amount of T17s and just you'll speed through your invitations to pick up some incandescents or eldritch ones. We'll put all these away. Now, how does this work? So in the past, I've shown, as well as others, syndicate layouts that have tons of lines connected all over the place, very specific connections required, specific placements. And if we look here, I have a much more simplified one. There's only 2 connections you can even see here. There are these green ones from Hillock the Jorgen and Tora the Guff. These aren't even necessary. Ideally, you would have a clean board, or at least this clean. The way that this farming strategy works is we get to play with the new idol system. And there are 2 idols in particular, 2 idol setups, I should say, in particular, that I am taking advantage of. I can show you here my elaborate paint setups. So, we will use 2 different idol setups. But don't worry, they're fairly cheap, very plentiful, and a lot of the modifiers on them don't matter. Although what you are farming alongside them can be a little expensive, depending on what you're trying to do. So our first idol setup, we're going to be taking advantage of a modifier here that shows up on the Conqueror idols, which are the 2x2s. That is, on completing your map, you will get 10 to 15 intelligence to a syndicate safe house. I have taken the liberty to put 4 of these into the build. You can have up to 4 2x2s, and I have them totaling to be 50. They add together, and they are like 1 instance. So every time you complete a map, one of your safe houses will get all of the intelligence at once. In this case, I have it at 50 because they need 100. It makes it so that it's a nice clean 2 event occurrences for a safe house to be ready. Now, as you can see down here, taking these 4 2x2s leaves you with a bunch of space. What I have personally filled it up with is a bunch of these 2x1s, the Kamasan and the Nobles, that have various boss drop mechanics, such as Final Map Boss drops Shaper Guardian maps, Elder Guardian maps, Synth maps. There's 1x1s that have Conquerors. You could do other kinds of farming strategies. There's a whole nice page on like the wiki or the DB that I would recommend looking at. But you have a lot of room to play with. You have a lot of space that you can kind of fit in other stuff. I would highly recommend doing a strategy that wants you to go through maps quickly, especially a strategy that allows you to kill the map boss, like the final boss of the map. So you won't be able to do any like destructive play, unfortunately, with this. So again, I have 4 of these Conquerors. They give me 50 intelligence or more every time I complete a map, and then I filled it in with a bunch of boss rush synergies. Now the second idol setup, and I'll go through how these play out. It looks a little more complicated than it is, but it's really as simple as get 4 of these, put whatever with it. The other idol setup, and I have them both going at the same time, is going to be a bunch of the 3x1s, which are the Totemic and Burials. They come with a modifier that is Immortal Syndicate members in your maps have a 20 to 25% increased chance to be accompanied by reinforcements. Now what this means is when you go up to an encounter, it shows a single member, there's a person standing there, and there is a chance for them to bring more people. We need this chance to happen for our strategy to work so that we can keep Gravicius at level 3 forever, without having to be very finicky about the syndicate encounters. This strategy, as you can see down here in the bottom left, you will want to stack as many of these as possible. You can put 8 in there. I would recommend trying to get some June chance on this side. Your idle setup 1 does not require you to run any syndicate. Your idle setup 2 does. So on this side, between the 3x1s and the fillers, make sure that you have a 100% chance for June. And then you can fill in with whatever you have. I have a few more boss maps that I have on this side that I've been running. Otherwise, you could do accompanied by rogue exile bodyguards are cool. They have rewards. They synergize well with the boss rushing. You could do the minor idols that give tier 1 to 15 maps to be +1 tier higher. It's really good for sustain. It's good for T17s. You could do Scarab Chance. It's kind of up to you. Again, you have less room on this side, but you can play around with it. I would definitely recommend for the idle setup 2 to use one of Wrath of the Cosmos or Eldritch Gaze, which are the keystones for Exarch and Eater altars. They're very helpful. This strategy, the idle setup 2, will have you going around the map. Idle setup 1, which is the one you run the majority of the time, is just a straight to the boss, at least for me, strategy. So this one doesn't necessarily need those things. How do we bring this all together? Like, what are we doing here? What is the point? So again, as I said, I want to be farming, in this case, Gravicius 3. It's something that a lot of people are pretty familiar with at this point, where in transportation, Gravicius will reward you with a full stack of a divination card, and depending on his rank, he will cut off certain weights. Weights being very common cards have a lot of weight. Rare cards like Mage Blood have very tiny weights, like in the single digits. So he will cut those down to make it so it's more likely for you to get the good stuff as you rank him up. So it's important for us to try to keep him at rank 3. Now, how do we keep him at rank 3? There's a little mechanic that happens with safe houses where the leaders, these 4 people here you see in the red circles, red boxes, whatever, the people at the top. When you run a safe house, the person who is the leader will be demoted. They will no longer be the leader, but they will keep their rank. So if I were to fill this transportation safe house and run the Gravicius, my Gravicius will no longer be leader. Corel would take over for him as he is my second person. But my Gravicius would retain his 3 stars. What this means is, again, with all the reinforcement chance, I would then attempt to get an encounter where Gravicius and Corel are in the same encounter. I would imprison Corel, and that would make my Gravicius a leader. And I'll show a quick little run of me going through a full loop so that people can get a better grasp of it. But I have a few little paints here I can show you to try to help you understand, I suppose. So these go in a line. It doesn't terribly matter what you want to call them. We'll call this one stage 4 because planning. But you end up in a situation where we can talk about this setup too a little. It's pretty straightforward, so you don't have to sweat it too much. What you're going to want to do before you do any of this stuff, right? You're going to want your members revealed. So everyone needs to have been in an encounter. You can do safe houses, just don't do the Katarina. And you will need the person you were going to farm to appear somewhere, so you know where they are. In this case, I wanted Gravicius to show up, so I just had the other members interact with each other and remove them from the syndicate until Gravicius showed up. And then I funneled everyone into the 3 encounters that are not transportation. You see they're kind of split up. They can be stacked more than this. It doesn't terribly matter. But the important part is that they're not in transportation and they're not like a free agent. They're not floating around. That's the end of the setup. That's the end of the basic setup. You have your farming target, in this case, Gravicius, in his proper place at rank 3. You have a dummy character. It doesn't matter who it is. You could try to figure out someone who has like a good rank 1 reward, but for the most part they don't, and they will never be higher than rank 1. So don't sweat who it is too much. And then everyone else is pushed off to the side. Once you have completed that objective, and ideally, again, you do not want connections going out from your farming objective. So in this case, my Gravicius and Corel do not want connections to anyone else. Once you have set that up, that is the end of your maintenance. You don't mess with anyone else. You never derank the people to the point where they get kicked out. You don't need to worry about connections. They're fully isolated at that point. Once you have done that, your board will look something similar to this. Your farming target will be rank 3. He'll be the leader. And we will be running the idle setup 1. Again, these are the ones that on completing a map, you gain intelligence. This goes with the boss rushing strategy. You will do that until your transportation, in this case, is full, which will lead you to this board, which again, these people are all just off to the side doing their own thing. You don't worry about them. Your Gravicius is rank 3. He's ready to be run. He will retain his stars. You run the safe house, which leads you to this board. You will then switch to your second idle setup. Again, this is the one that has increased chance for reinforcements because we need Gravicius and Corel to show up in the same encounter. As opposed to the first strategy earlier on where we were purely boss rushing, while you're in this stage where you need to get Corel D-ranked, you will go looking for your transportation encounter. Earlier on, when you're in this stage 4, building up intelligence, you don't do Syndicate. You don't even need Syndicate chance. I don't have Syndicate chance while I'm doing this. I just have the intelligence gain on finishing the map. While you're here though, make sure you have June chance and go find your transportation encounter. Ideally, it typically takes like 2 to 3 times. It can go a little longer, that's fine. But you will keep chasing down the transportation mechanic. Eventually, both of them will show up. You will click Corel first. You will interrogate him, which will kick him down into jail and push your Gravicius up to leadership. And now we're back here again. And then you swap back to idle setup 1. You complete it with the intelligence by boss rushing, and eventually you get a free safe house. That is all of the loop. That is all the maintenance. You don't need to worry about anything else. As I said, after this I'll have a short little demo of me doing a loop and showing you how it works, so people who are a little more like hands-on, I guess, can get an idea. But that's it. I hope y'all will enjoy it. Again, the point of this strategy, the reason I'm farming it, is Gravicius gives full stacks of divination cards. It's kind of cool. Maybe you get a headhunter, maybe you get a mage blood, maybe you just get like 7 divines is kind of common, 10 divines, whatever have you. Go have fun with it. If you really want, you could do stuff like, you could farm intervention, try to get a Paradoxica. You could farm Haku for ambush scarabs. They're pretty valuable. Things of this nature in intervention. I would recommend Gravicius. And then I'm just farming a bunch of boss maps, T17s, and in general having a good time. Alright, so I've talked about what the farm is, the objectives. We can go through a loop or two real quick, just to show how it plays out, so it's a little easier for people to maybe follow along. So in this case, I'll be starting with my June, where I have recently imprisoned the Corel. My Gravicius, who is rank 3, has assumed leadership, and I need to fill the transportation safe house. To do this, as we talked about earlier, I will switch to the idle setup that has a bunch of completing your maps grants intelligence, where I have 50 of it, and we'll boss rush some maps until it hits the transportation twice. Alongside this, I will be farming a bunch of guardian maps, which synergizes well with rushing at the boss. So at this stage, this is technically called stage 4, but they go in a line, it doesn't really matter what they are. All I'm doing is running at the boss, killing the boss, going to the next map. And I'll do this a few times, we'll call it like 3 or something, and then check on the state of June. Something that can be helpful is if you hold Alt and then click June, it'll pull up the not the transportation, but the betrayal menu. You can see we luckily got one of the transportation already. It still needs to hit it a second time. And although we can see that fortification and research are full, they can still be chosen. So every time it's just another 1 in 4. But the objective remains the same. We'll enter the map, we'll run straight at the boss. We kill a few monsters in the beginning here. It will spawn the Exarch mobs, which helps with our Exarch progression for invitations, as well as we'll have a little bit of % chance for an altar to spawn. And every now and then you'll get embers or corrupted jewelry or something of this nature that will make you want to run it. We got very fortunate here. It's normally not this fast, but our transportation is ready already. So what I'll do is something that I do just for habit. So I'll go to my map device. I'll switch to my next idle setup, which will be useful 2 stages from now. I can showcase the little paint thing again. So we began here, right? We're stage 4, whatever you want to call it. Our Gravicius was rank 3, and we needed to get him up. All we're doing was spamming maps until the idle setup, the number 1 idle setup, this, with all the intelligence, filled the transportation. And once that does, we go back to stage 1, which is here, where the only thing that matters here is that our transportation is ready and that the Gravicius is rank 3 here, which it should, providing you are following the steps. The state that the fortification, the research, the intervention, it doesn't matter if they're full, it doesn't matter if they're not full. They're mostly irrelevant to the setup. The only thing you care about is that the transportation is ready. And so we'll go into the map. We've switched over to the idle. This is in preparation in a second here, where we need to get Corel deranked again. Go to June, we'll run the Gravicius. And something that's very nice about this farm is, since you have a fairly high golden hour, you're not going to be better than like T17s or dedicated shrine or breach strategies, but unique monsters drop a good amount of items, including idols, just from, you know, natural rarity as well as gold. They actually generate a good amount of gold. It's helped me push my town. And then experience. It's a fairly safe strategy. You know, you don't even have to be running the maps rare, although I would recommend it. You do get a little bit of a bonus, like I said, with the idols. And then the Syndicate safe house itself is a good source of experience. Okay, so we've run the Gravicius. We look at the map. The safe house board. We can see our Gravicius is in jail, and our Corel has assumed leadership of transportation. This is fine, because there's only Gravicius who isn't assigned to one of the other safe houses. It's going to pull the Gravicius out to put it into the transportation. It's part of the thing that makes the loop so efficient, is that it's self-sustained. So again, our objective now, if I pull it up over here. So we've run the safe house. We're now in stage 2. Our Corel is leader. Our Gravicius is going to be behind him. Our objective is to enter the maps using idle setup 2, which again is this setup here that has a bunch of immortal members have a chance to have reinforcements. We don't use the modifier that has additional chance for leaders to show up, because from my testing, the encounters need to have reinforcements trigger, and then if reinforcements trigger, it will then attempt to make the leader show up over a different member. However, in the setup that we're running here, there's only 2 people in the entire transportation, and so if it does pull a reinforcement, it's always going to pull the leader. This is how it's been going so far. This is why it's important that your members that you are farming, you can do this in any of the houses, any of the people, but whoever you are farming and their associate who you keep deranking, they do not have any outward connections. You need to keep them isolated to each other. That way, when reinforcements show up, it's always within the event. So again, we're going to run under idle setup 2. We're going to enter the map. We're going to look for the transportation encounter. If your fortification is not full and it spawns, you are free to go up to the fortification, run the encounter, interrogate people so that you can fill the fortification so it stops showing up. Be sure not to interrogate anyone down to 0 ranks, as well as to not choose any options that would cause connections to Gravicius or Corel. It'll be fairly obvious. Other than that, you're safe to do whatever. Anything else you don't have to worry about doing. You don't go run research. Intervention may eventually fall out, and then you can run it. It's fine. Just release everyone. You're not trying to build intelligence otherwise. Just leave them alone. We're going to enter the map. We're going to look for transportation. It will be Gravicius. Ideally, he will bring a reinforcement in the form of Corel. we will imprison Corel, which will force our Gravicius to be leader again. So we'll now go try to do that. This step, I found it takes 3 turns or so. I should let that guy know. But I've had it as fast as 1. I've had it as slow as 7, 8. Sometimes the dry streaks are pretty bad. But I found it about like 2 or 3 is what it takes with all of the reinforcement chance. So again, we have accompanied reinforcement idols. We're going to continue running the maps. Now I will enter the map and I will look for the transportation.
Can I not have but a moment's respite?
You can kind of skirt the edges a little tighter than I'm doing here. So for instance, you could walk up this lane just a bit and then walk up this lane just a bit, and you would be able to see whether your transportation was there. But feel free to just full clear a little more. It's fine. Because your idle setup 2 is designed to go around and clear the maps, you will probably have some more idols with that in mind to take advantage of. So we got very fortunate here. We started with a Gravicius. We began the encounter. We got him low. He pulled a reinforcement in the form of Corel. This is perfect. We can show this here real quick, and then we'll execute it in the game. So this is stage 3. We have successfully pulled the second member, in this case Corel for my setup. I'm going to speak to Corel first. We're going to use the interrogate option, which will put him in jail, which will, more importantly, make the Gravicius leader. And then we're back to stage 4, where we will move back to idle setup 1 and repeat the loop. At this stage, I will then put the idle setup 1 that gives intelligence on finishing the map, and I will boss rush until the transportation is ready again. So we'll go to Corel. I will choose interrogate. Again, because they're self-contained, because all these other people are busy doing something else, he will immediately get kicked out once we start setting things up again. This transportation, you can click this. There's a little to be said of if you want these loops to be a little faster but cost a little more, while you're doing this stage, while you're doing the one with the idle setup 2, you could be running Betrayal Intelligence Scarabs, as well as the unique idol. But it's not necessarily consistent anyway, so I wouldn't really recommend it. But we can click this. It doesn't matter, because he needs 50. He goes in increments of 50, right? So this 22 doesn't matter. We'll click it anyway. So we've completed our objective. Our Gravicius is leader again. We want to get back to idle setup 1, so let's go kill the boss and switch over and continue boss rushing. Now that that is taken care of, I don't need to run Syndicate anymore until my next Gravicius is ready. So I can open up the menu here. You can see again the Gravicius is here. We'll switch back to the original idle setup, which has intelligence on completing a map for a random Immortal Syndicate encounter. And now I'm just boss rushing. The nice thing about this strategy is there is very little setup in the beginning. You don't have to worry about a bunch of connections. You don't have to worry about people being in necessarily like very specific places. And then it's mostly passive. You don't do that much Syndicate. You can just do other strategies, whether it be boss rushing or essences or beasts or whatever have you. And just so long as you make sure to be killing the map bosses, you will passively generate Graviciuses. I do recommend something that is centered around finishing your maps as quickly as possible, though. You can, of course, do it with any other strategy. There's nothing wrong with it going slower, but it synergizes well with something like a boss rush. That would be my recommendation. There's a bunch of different boss rush things. There's Conquer maps, which I think are the worst in my opinion to stack the modifier, because it's not a flat percent. You have Elder Guardians, Shaper Guardians, which I'm a big fan of. You have Synth maps, which have a lower percent, but they are more valuable, as it should be. Alternatively, you can do things like Rogue Exile Bodyguards, which will spawn beside the bosses. You can do bosses drop adjacent maps for looping something like Toxic Sewers, maybe.
Thanks to your hard work.
But you would just continue repeating this. I notably do not have any June spawn chance on this setup, on my first idol setup, because there's no purpose for you to be doing Syndicate if you want to be doing it passively, right? You can do this a little more hands-on, of course. Make it go a little faster. But the way that I have it set up and the way that I've been running it this league is I want the Gravicius and the Syndicate stuff to be on the side. I want it to be a nice bonus as opposed to the focus of my farming strategy. Because we have the extra idle pages, it was nice to be able to make use of them for more than just swapping around. Actually develop a strategy that used both of them. But as you can see, he ticked once. I would continue running these maps until it ticks a second time, but that's the loop. Briefly with the beautiful paints again. So we're here, you run maps, idle setup 1 until your transportation fills. Once it fills, we're here, you run the safe house, you get the Gravicius reward. After that, you will switch to your second idle setup, the one that has the reinforcement chance. You will run maps specifically looking for your transportation encounter. Ideally, in under like 3 maps. That way these don't pop out, but it doesn't. If they do, it's fine. It's a little smoother. Your reinforcement will happen. Corel will show up. You will then imprison him, as shown here. You do the encounter. They both show up. You click Corel first, or whoever is your second. You interrogate him, he goes to jail, your Gravicius becomes leader, and now we're back. You resume your Idle 1 setup, doing your boss rush or whatever farm, and that's it. That is my passive Gravicius farming strategy. Or was the Settlers of Phrecia, something of that nature. But yeah, I don't know. It's been pretty fun. I've been enjoying it. Something that's really nice about it too is there's a good amount of these idols. You do need these 4 to hit 50%, but you have a good amount of leeway, right? You have 60 total here, you can shave a few numbers. But these reinforcements, they roll 20 to 25%, but they don't have to be maxed. It's just like slightly more efficient, and they're pretty plentiful. And then all the empty slots are just kind of up for you to decide what to do with. But yeah, I hope it works out for y'all. If it does, let me know. I want to hear about all your amazing finds, your divines, your mage bloods, your whatever have you. Leave some comments. Come stop by the Twitch. I don't know, all that good stuff. And yeah, hope y'all enjoy the league. Take care.